look at Dave Gahan today, the quintessential frontman and the baritone powerhouse of Depeche Mode, you see a man who conquered the world. He moves like a dervish and sings with a voice that sounds like it was forged in the middle of a velvet thunderstorm. But if you were walking the concrete streets of Essex in the mid-1970s, you wouldn't have seen a rock star. You would have seen a tearaway. You'd see a kid with a leather jacket, a chip on his shoulder, and a record with the local police that was getting longer by the week. Today on Strange Words Music, we're going back to the beginning. Before the stadium tours and the synth-pop revolution, we are looking at the chaotic, often heartbreaking and surprisingly artistic early years of the voice that defined a generation. Dave's story begins in 1962, but the first major fracture happened when he was just 6 months old. His biological father, Len Calcott, walked out, and for years Dave lived a lie that was born out of a mother's protection. He grew up believing his stepfather, Jack Gahan, was his real dad. Life in a post-war Newtown was grit and grey. It was a working-class environment where you were expected to fit in, but Dave never quite did. When Jack died when Dave was just 10 years old, his world tilted. The real shock came a year later when Dave came home to find a stranger in the house. His mother introduced the man as his real father, Len. Imagine being 11 years old, grieving the only father you knew, and being told your life was a different story entirely. Len stayed for only a year, gave Dave a few gifts, and then disappeared again. That kind of abandonment leaves a permanent mark, and it turned a quiet student into a lifelong rebel. While Dave was starting to feel the pull of the streets, his ears were being shaped by the atmosphere inside his home. His stepfather Jack had been a jazz musician, and because of this, the Gahan household didn't sound like the typical pop-obsessed British home of the 60s. The air was thick with the sophisticated, mournful, and complex sounds of Miles Davis, John Coltrane, and Billie Holiday. For a young Dave, this was foundational. He wasn't just hearing catchy melodies, he was hearing soul and mood. He was learning how a voice or a trumpet could carry a sense of longing without saying a single word. However, to a rebellious kid, jazz felt like old people's music. Dave has admitted that the constant jazz at home actually pushed him to seek out something louder and more abrasive, creating a fascinating tension between internal soulfulness and external noise. Years later, you can hear that influence in his work, as he sings with a bluesy, jazz-inflected weight over the cold, hard machinery of a synthesizer. School was essentially a battleground for Dave. He attended Basildon school, but he spent most of his time trying to find ways to leave it. He wasn't a bad student because he lacked intelligence. He simply had zero tolerance for authority. He was the kid in the back of the class with the dyed hair, already checked out. Contrary to the legend that he was rejected by every employer, Dave did try to enter the workforce. He famously spent time working at Tesco, stacking shelves and doing the grunt work of a supermarket clerk. He also worked as a greengrocer's assistant and a construction worker, but he wasn't built for a 9-to-5 life. Eventually, he found a loophole through Southend Art College. For Dave, art college was a sanctuary. It was the only place where being a weirdo was a credential rather than a crime. He enrolled to study fashion and design, and this is where the Dave Gahan look began to take shape. He'd walk into class in gold lame suits or punk gear, realizing he didn't want to draw the clothes. He wanted to be the guy on the stage wearing them. Even with art college as a creative outlet, the wild boy was still very much alive. Dave was addicted to the buzz of the streets. He became a juvenile delinquent, stealing cars, joyriding, and spray painting walls because he loved the thrill of the chase. By age 14, he'd been in front of juvenile court 3 times. One of the most famous stories of his youth involves his time in a senior attendance centre where he spent his Saturdays doing manual labour and getting his hair cut by the police as punishment. He hated the system, and Essex felt like a cage. But while he was fighting the law, he was finding his tribe. This was the era of punk, and Dave began hanging out at the Bridge House in Canning Town. He was obsessed with The Damned and David Bowie. He wasn't a musician yet, but he had the clothes, the attitude, and a burning need to be anywhere else. The transition to stardom was a fluke. In 1980, Vince Clarke, Andrew Fletcher, and Martin Gore had a band called Composition of Sound. They were shy and lacked stage presence, but everything changed when Vince Clarke overheard Dave in a local jam session. Dave wasn't singing a hymn, he was singing David Bowie's Heroes. Vince was floored, not just by the voice, but by the way Dave carried himself. He had the London cool that the rest of the guys lacked. Dave joined the band and suggested a new name he'd seen in a French fashion magazine, Depeche Mode. What Dave Gahan achieved from that point on is nothing short of a miracle of reinvention. He took the pain of abandonment, the sophisticated ear he developed from his stepfather's jazz records, and the defiance of his teenage years to become the physical manifestation of the music. While Martin Gore provided the soul, Dave became the body. He evolved into arguably the greatest frontman of his generation. By the late 80s, the transformation was complete. On the legendary Music for the Masses and devotional tours, Dave wasn't just singing, he was leading a congregation. He mastered the art of the stadium priest, commanding tens of thousands of people with a single flick of his wrist. He is one of the few frontmen to stare down the darkest pits of rock and roll excess, literally passing away for several minutes in 1996 and coming back with a voice that was even stronger and more resonant than before. He took the cold reputation of 80s synth-pop and injected it with the grit of the blues and the swagger of Mick Jagger. Today, Depeche Mode is a global institution with over 100 million records sold and a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But beyond the numbers, Dave's true achievement is his presence. He is the man who proved that a tearaway kid with a police record could make the whole world sing along. He didn't just escape Essex, he took the pain he found there and turned it into a religion. Dave Gahan didn't just survive his childhood, he used it to build an empire of sound. To understand how Dave Gahan became one of the most recognizable voices in history, you have to look at the patchwork of influences he carried with him from those early days in Essex. While the rest of Depeche Mode was often focused on the technical precision of synthesizers and sequencers, Dave was looking at the gods of performance. He wasn't just influenced by the jazz in his childhood home, he was a sponge for the charisma of the glam rock and punk eras. Early on, you can hear him trying to find his footing. In the Speak and Spell era, his voice was higher, thinner, almost boyish, fitting the bubbly pop melodies of the time. But as the 1980s progressed and the band's sound turned darker and more industrial under Martin Gore's songwriting, Dave began to look toward the crooners and the outcasts. He was deeply influenced by the emotional weight of David Bowie, not just the Heroes era, but the theatricality of Ziggy Stardust. He watched how Bowie could change his persona and his tone to fit a mood. Then there was the influence of Mark Bolan and T-Rex, which gave Dave that touch of glam, swagger, and vibrato. But perhaps most importantly, Dave looked toward the raw power of Iggy Pop and the bluesy, dangerous growl of Jim Morrison of The Doors. He realized that a frontman didn't just have to sing the notes, he had to inhabit the space between the notes. As Depeche Mode moved into the Violator and Songs of Faith and Devotion eras, Dave's voice underwent a massive physical change. He stopped singing from his throat and started singing from his gut. He developed a rich, operatic baritone that could handle the heavy, gospel-infused blues of tracks like Condemnation or the sinister, whispered intimacy of Personal Jesus. This wasn't just natural growth, it was a conscious effort to bring the human into the machine. He began to use his voice as an instrument of texture, adding gravel, adding breath, and leaning into the imperfections that made him sound like a man who had lived through everything he was singing about. Through years of relentless touring, his vocal range expanded, becoming more soulful and resonant. He learned how to use the microphone as a tool, moving from a whisper to a stadium shaking roar in a single breath. He proved that even in a band built on electronics, the most powerful instrument would always be the human soul, filtered through a lifetime of jazz, punk, and the blues. By the time the 90s hit, he wasn't just the singer for a synth band anymore. He had become a premier rock vocalist, capable of carrying the weight of the world in a single baritone line. Thank you so much for joining us on this journey through the early life of one of music's most resilient icons. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Dave Gahan's story, make sure to show some love by hitting the like button. It really helps the channel reach more music fans like you. Don't forget to subscribe to Strange Words Music and turn on those notifications so you never miss an episode about the legends who shaped our world. Which Depeche Mode moment defines Dave Gahan for you? Drop a comment below and let's keep the conversation going. We'll see you in the next video. Stay devoted.